Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Product Angle Show. And on today's episode, I have someone from the UK, one of my favorite places on the earth, Liz Love.
Hello everybody.
Welcome, Liz. How are you doing today?
Yeah, pretty good, thank you. Yeah, pretty good. Enjoying a bit of sunshine for once.
Excellent. So tell us who you are and what you do.
So I am Chief Customer Officer at ProdPad, and I look after a wonderful team of people who are doing everything that's customer facing at ProdPad, whether that's marketing, whether that's sales, whether it's support and customer success. So between us all, we make sure that all the ProdPad customers get the best possible interaction with our team as possible.
What is ProdPad? Give us a quick summary of what ProdPad is.
So ProdPad is a product management tool that helps product managers to manage their vision, their strategy, their roadmap, their backlog of ideas, customer feedback, and try and bring all of that together to produce the best possible product and solve the best customer problems.
Excellent. Now, before we get started into roadmaps, I like to ask this question for all the guests that have been on the show so far. Tell us something about you that we cannot Google.
I don't know whether you can't Google it. I think if you really dug into my past, you could find this. But I have a dog who has done TV work and been in like crime dramas and TV ads and that kind of stuff. He was actually killed, in inverted commas, in a TV drama.
Wow.
Yes, and he's probably more famous than I am anyway.
That's awesome. That's really good. What type of dog do you have?
Sorry, could you say that again? I lost you.
What kind of dog do you have?
Oh, he's a Springer Spaniel, so a brown and white Springer Spaniel. In fact, no, I thought he might be under my desk, but no, he's obviously hiding off with the kids somewhere. He's about 10 years old. He's slowing down a little bit now, but he still has his puppy moments.
Bless him. Bless him. So how did you get started in product? You give us a quick overview of your career, because I was Googling you just before, and you did chemistry back at
Yeah.
So how did you make that transition?
I think I did that classic thing in school where, you find something that you're good at, which for me was always like science and maths and kind of technology related subjects. And I did a chemistry degree, but then came out of uni, just needed to get a job. So kind of fell into something that fell into something else. Did an evening course in some kind of software stuff, some coding, and then just fell into a graduate trainee role for a technology company in product support.
Okay.
And like a lot of people, then fell accidentally into product from there. I do think that product support generally is a really good way of getting into product, because it gives you the opportunity to learn the product, but also to interact with customers and understand why they're using your product. Yeah. So you kind of get a bit of a grounding in everything, in that you learn about the product, you learn about customer problems, you learn about interacting with and all in all, it's kind of a really good basis for a career in product management.
Definitely. You're not the first person to say that product support or the support side of the house, you get to see so many different aspects and you build so many skills from there that it really helps you in your role as a product manager.
Absolutely. And I think in support anyway, it's kind of, you're always solving problems. That's what support is. So it gives you that mindset that, customers have got issues that need to be solved. And some of those might be problems with your product, and some of those might be problems that they're experiencing in day-to-day life that your product doesn't support. So it kind of there's a natural move, I think, from support or success over to product management.
Absolutely. Completely agree with you. Now, as we talk about roadmaps, I feel like roadmaps are a little like dating when you're starting off the date. Everyone's doing it, but no one really knows how to do it, right? And
good analogy.
For a lack of a better term, if you will, right? every product has a roadmap. Every founder has their long-term vision that gets drawn up in a Trello board or some kind of Notion or some other software. And then as you move up, companies start using software like ProdPad, and a roadmap or the vision is something that everyone has and works towards, whether you're a product manager, whether you're a founder. But what is it? What is it in your opinion? What is a product roadmap?
I think a roadmap is a way of communicating to others about intention, about strategy. So it's not necessarily a list of things that you are definitely going to do. That's more like a project plan or a project management plan or a release plan. A roadmap is really a way of communicating and sharing strategy with the people around you, whether they're internal stakeholders or whether they're customers, and a way of making sure that the thing that's in your head that you have a feeling for about what you want to do with your product is communicated in a way that other people can understand. I like to think of an easy way of understanding roadmaps. Well, there's a couple. First of all, Jana, my CEO, she will say that a roadmap is a prototype for your strategy. It's a way of showing people what you intend and then eliciting feedback from that. But I also tend to think of a roadmap as being a way of communicating what you want to do and why, rather than when, how, and who. When, how, and who is your project management plan or your release plan. But a roadmap is what and why, and it's something that changes and adapts over time as you learn more and as you get feedback from the people around you.
That's a good point. Now, in your opinion, and I know ProdPad's roadmap is public, do you feel that there should be a public roadmap as well as a internal only roadmap, or do you feel that it should be just be one in terms of your roadmap, but then anything else which isn't roadmap related is effectively a project plan or a delivery plan or whatever you want to call it? What's your opinion there?
So I think you're asking a couple of different things. One is that should your roadmap be completely public? Mm-hmm. You show some things publicly and keep some things close to your chest. Yes. And I think the latter. Okay. I mean, ProdPad, we publish a public roadmap, but there are always going to be things on our roadmap that we do keep internal to the company that are either not of interest or not relevant to our external audience.
Sure.
So yes, we have a public roadmap, but we also do maintain a kind of master roadmap. And you'll see when I demo the product how we do it, but we keep a master roadmap which has perhaps some things that are maybe not making it onto the public roadmap as well. As for whether it is just a list of stuff or whether it's a project plan, then again, no, it's something that is about it's sharing the details of the problems we want to solve, rather than explaining every feature that we're going to deliver.
Got it. That's an interesting conversation. Quick detour into features versus benefits. When people are looking to use software, we talk about features, but also benefits. And hey.com, the new email service, their homepage is really just that love letter to email, and it creates that story. It doesn't tell you anything about the feature, but features that the email service has, but it somewhat draws you into the service.
Yeah, and then that's when you're getting into marketing, which is like another thing all again. I mean, marketing is about attracting people to your product and explaining to them the benefits that your product will give them. I think when you look at a product roadmap, that's more about what are the problems that we're going to solve for you. Now, along the way, you will build features or make changes. And some of those are things that you'll talk about as a feature in its own right, but some of them you may talk about in terms of the problems that they solve. So I don't think you can kind of pull the two together. A roadmap is definitely something very different from a marketing website, but a roadmap can also attract people to your brand in terms of what you stand for and the kind of problems that you want to solve.
Definitely. What are some of the important things that you should definitely put into a roadmap, or what is some of the elements or the thinking behind putting something into a roadmap? Because I guess let's start with that question. I'm going to make it a two-part question, but let's not make it a two-part question. Let's make it a one-part question. What are some of the things that should go into important things that should go into a roadmap?
I think it's really, really important to have a clear definition of what problems you're trying to solve. Because as you learn about those problems, you possibly will change the way you solve them. You might go into looking at a problem thinking that it's going to have a particular feature or a particular solution. And as you learn about it, you change it. So rather than having a big long list of features, saying, I'm going to use AI to solve this, or I'm going to use a drop down to solve that, or I'm going to put a form to do this, talk more about the problems you're trying to solve and why you're trying to solve them. Because that will then allow you to learn more. It will allow you to understand the people who are going to use your product. And actually, if you focus on problems first, you've got a better chance of coming up with the right solution. I think the most important thing you should have on a roadmap is the problems you're trying to solve and why you're trying to solve them. What's the desired outcome that you're trying to reach?
Fair enough. Now, the way typically a roadmap is built is you have now, next, and future. Is that typically what you see in roadmap? Something you're working on now, something you're going to work on next, and something you can work in the future? Or are there different iterations of roadmaps?
So there are different. So this is where we come to sort of like a philosophical side of things.
Yeah.
What I believe and what ProdPad believe, and thankfully what a lot of our, or all of our customers and a lot of the market seems to believe, is that a roadmap is a way, as I say, of communicating strategy. So we would say that something like now and next and later is a way of doing that, so that you can talk about what you're planning in different levels of granularity, depending on how much you know about it and how quickly you're going to solve the problem. So if you have a now column that's got things in it that you're working on now that you understand well, there's going to be a lot of granularity. When you look at that next column, there's going to be things that you're working on that you're learning about. And that later column is going to be things that are kind of, nebulous or sort of aspirational, things that you want to do or problems you want to solve, but maybe you don't understand very well. So the granularity is not there. That's what we would describe as a roadmap. Now, I know that there are people out there who use timelines or Gantt charts as roadmaps. And I think that's historical. I think that's how everybody was taught that that's what a roadmap looks like. And even if you Google roadmaps, the images that come up, a lot of them will be Gantt charts and timelines. What our argument is, and I'm saying this from personal experience, those kinds of roadmaps really trip up a product manager and cause problems for them, because as soon as you start to list out features on a timeline, you naturally, even if you have accurate timelines for the first or the second feature in your list, things change, assumptions change, conditions change. How quickly your team can produce a piece of code might change depending on how many people in the team. The conditions of the market change. The only constant in life is change. We've certainly seen that this year. So putting a roadmap on a timeline inevitably leads the product manager into a kind of trap whereby they're talking about delivering features or solutions to problems by a certain date. And then it's usually the product manager who has to stand up in front of others, either internal or external, and explain why it is that they couldn't meet that date and take the pressure and the hit for that, when really the product manager is not responsible for delivering something by a certain date. Again, I speak from very bitter experience on this one, having done it and having stood up in front of customers on numerous occasions and tried to explain why we weren't able to deliver something by a certain time. And it's just because of everything around us changing so often and so frequently that having a timeline on a roadmap is, as I say, it's just setting up product managers to fall into a trap. So we would definitely encourage that now, next, later format, because it allows you to focus the conversation on what you're working on and why, and talk about strategy rather than to get caught up in questions about when something is going to be delivered.
That makes a lot of sense, to be honest. In your experience, and maybe from your some of your customers, what suggestions do you have for founders or small businesses or startups rather, who are looking to raise money and they have to communicate the roadmap to investors? Any thoughts on that?
I think that's about talking to investors. Yeah, so it doesn't matter which stakeholder you're speaking to, whether it's a developer, a customer, a stakeholder, or an investor. I think if they think about things in terms of a time scale and delivering something by a certain date, that's very output focused. It's very much, I'm going to deliver something by a date, or I'm going to deliver a certain number of velocity, a story points at a certain velocity, but it doesn't show value. It's not about showing when the market's going to see value from your product. So rather than talking about being fixated on dates and having certain features delivered by certain dates, I think it's much better to talk to investors and execs about the kind of problems you want to solve, whether they are the right problems to solve, whether they are the kind of problems that if you solve them, that will result in a return on investment for the company. I think it's also important to talk about risk and having an approach to product management, which is kind of experimental in nature and lean in nature, with that now, next, later roadmap being a lean roadmap. By being lean, you have a much better opportunity to solve a problem for the least amount of investment. And also it gives you the opportunity to meet your market needs and get product market fit in a much less risky way, rather than planning 12 months out and saying, I'm going to deliver something by a certain date. You've got no guarantee that you're actually going to solve the user's problem and get return on investment in that time. So I think it's about explaining to investors what the traps are around a timeline and how it can result in something maybe being delivered by the right time, but maybe not hitting the mark in terms of what customers need, and how having a fixation on time can really result in forgetting that we're trying to deliver value to the market.
Definitely. At the end of the day, I think it's very important that we remember that we're trying to provide value to the end user versus anything else, because if you can provide that value and you can communicate the value, that makes people want to use your product through a trial or whatever. But then if they see that continued value, then they'll want to keep using your product, retention. And then if they really like your product, then you have the opportunity to get them to refer other people into the product.
Absolutely. So it might feel like you're looking too far out ahead, but I'm sure it was just this week I saw a quote that was something like, the best short-term strategy is to have a long-term view. And if you have got that kind of further out view and thinking about how you're going to be successful for a longer period of time, then that makes some of those short-term decisions easier, because whilst they might put money in your back pocket today, they're going to cause problems for you further down the line. So yes, thinking about value and long-term value is important.
Absolutely. Who owns a roadmap?
I think ownership's a bit of a funny concept, really. I mean, people like to own things. I think that the whole product team together should all have an input into the roadmap. The person who is maybe responsible for keeping it up to date and having the right information on there is probably the product manager. But I don't think that the product manager should be arrogant enough to think that everything that they do is necessarily right. Again, I'll lean back on one of Jana's quotes, which is that product managers don't know all the answers, but they ask all the best questions. And it's about collaboration. It's about working together. It's about coming up with a solution, or coming up with decisions, let me say, that everybody's bought into, because everybody understands the input and the discussions that have happened around it. So I think making a roadmap is a very collaborative process, which means there's joint ownership, but maybe it's the product manager who's responsible for keeping it up to date and communicating it and considering all the angles.
Definitely. When collaborating with others, internal and external stakeholders to put something on the roadmap, what teams should be involved and at what stage, do you think?
I don't think there's ever a time that's too early for people to be involved in discussions about product.
Yeah.
As everybody's got a different perspective, everybody's got a different point of view. So whether you're a marketer or a developer or a customer or a UX person or a product person or whoever, sales, marketing, success, all these different teams, everybody's got a different perspective. So if you've got visibility, if you've got transparency into the plans for a product, maybe by seeing a roadmap, maybe by getting visibility into that, you have the opportunity to speak up and say, that's all very well, but have you considered this angle? Have you considered that angle? Have you considered the other? So I don't think there's ever a time which is too early for people to be looking at the roadmap and contributing to it. And I also think that everybody should have the opportunity to do that. The level of interest will differ. Different people have different levels of interest, but everybody should have the ability to contribute.
Absolutely, 100% agree with you there. I'm a big fan of getting teams in early, especially engineering, because they can think in certain ways that, when you're actually about to build something. I've worked with some engineering managers who have said, well, this is the spec or the PRD or whatever you want to call it, and we've built it exactly to that. But then I'm thinking, but we're going to hit problems A, B, and C down the road. Why didn't you tell me at the beginning? And I've had engineering managers tell us that's not our job. And my point of view has always been, yes, it is, because we're building it together. If you can foresee issues and challenges in what we're thinking, tell us now, not when you've built it, spent 50 hours, whatever number of hours building it, and then come back and say, yeah, we knew that.
Product management is a risk game. At the end of the day, product management is there to reduce the risk of failure. And it's there to reduce the risk of building the wrong thing. And in my mind, the best possible way of reducing risk is to hear everybody's voice and have everybody's point of view, because we all think differently. We all come from a different perspective, whether it's our personal background or whether it's our role that we have within the business. I've been saved by developers many times in my career by making mistakes, and I've been grateful for it. Although at the time, I'm sure it felt like, oh no, I can't believe that that's happened. But, in the long run, it meant we didn't deliver a product that was problematic for some reason. Exactly. So, you need to hear voices as early as possible and as many of them as possible.
Definitely. So, as a product manager with the team, you got this direction, you want to move in this direction. When you're ready to put something in the roadmap, what's the best way to make it concise? Would you say allow SSO, for example, as a roadmap item, or should it be more abstract in the sense that explore integrations for corporate networks? Because SSO may not be the best choice. It may be the standard. It may not, be the best choice for a particular company. How should somebody think about actually putting maybe a topic or a concept on the actual roadmap that's meaningful?
So everybody, in the same way as everybody has a different perspective on how to build something or what should be done, everybody's got a different need in terms of the level of granularity that they need from a roadmap. I'm a great believer in having a hierarchy of information. So having a really concise, high-level view of what problem you're trying to solve and what objective or what the desired outcome is, that's certainly something that should be on there. But also, as you start to understand more about how you're going to solve that problem, absolutely put features on there, but group them together in a theme where that theme is the problem to solve. So while you might have a theme like we want to increase engagement by adding some kind of social aspect to what we're doing on our website, that's a desired outcome. It's a problem that you're trying to solve. But then you might break that down into add a Facebook, widget, or add an Instagram integration or whatever it might be. So you do need to have the ability to think high level in terms of the problem and the desired outcome, but you also need to start talking about what are the things that we're going to deliver and break that down into something that then the development team can grab a hold of and actually execute on. So you'll see when I show you ProdPad in a second that the way we would recommend, and certainly the way that I've done it in the past, is to think about what's my desired outcome, what problem am I solving, which I think will help me reach that desired outcome, what are the different ways I could solve that problem, which of these am I going to approach first? How is this going to help me be successful? How will I know when I've been successful? It's quite a lot of information, but by using a hierarchy and breaking it down into different levels of granularity, you can put that across in a way that everybody can understand.
That makes sense. As product managers, product people, there's so much knowledge out there. And what are you seeing in terms of the best ways to keep knowledge in one central place, if you can, that can be shared with different stakeholders? But I don't want to use the word one source of truth, but in a way, is there such a thing in your experience where it's a repository, if you like, of knowledge, learnings, things like that? What are you seeing in terms of that? Because that's a big gap that I think that is there at the moment.
Are you talking in terms of the knowledge about what the product does, or the direction the product is moving in?
General product knowledge. I have documents in Notion. I have Google Docs. I have a couple of other software that I use, and I have little bits of knowledge in all these different software solutions. How are you using ProdPad or something to keep all that knowledge in one place so it's easy to access, but you can share it with other people as well?
Well, clearly I'm going to talk about ProdPad, and clearly I'm going to show you around that in a second. And to us, obviously, that's a massive part of it. We do use ProdPad ourselves. Quite clearly, we would be mad not to.
Yep.
But it's not the only tool that we use. We do use other tools as well. So I think it does depend on what stage you're at in the product process. I think if you're early stage, if you're discovery, if you're planning, if you're looking ahead and you're considering the whole product life cycle, then a product management tool like ProdPad is definitely something that you're going to need. Having said that, I think delivery and execution is a completely different process to discovery and planning.
Yeah.
So certainly what we suggest and what we do ourselves is we have a separate tool for delivery where that is more project management focused.
Okay.
And we use ProdPad for discovery, for planning, for keeping all the moving parts together of how our product might work out, what our vision is, what our objectives are, what a strategy is. All of that kind of goes into ProdPad and then guides the execution. But then we use other tools to manage that execution because that's what they're there for and that's what they're good at.
Perfect answer. I didn't want to lead you on, but I think that's exactly where I wanted to go, that you what you just mentioned. So thank you so much for that. Okay, so let's move on to what is ProdPad. I'm excited to see what it is. Tell me, before we move into the demo, give me just a little blurb about what it is, who it's for, and what are some of the coolest features.
As far as who it's for, we would say ProdPad is for everybody who's got an interest or a sort of an input into the product and the success of the product and delivery of the product. So ProdPad's a product management tool that would encourage a positive, lean product culture. It provides a way to define the business model, to define the vision, the objectives, and all of that kind of work that's associated with building your product. So that's collecting feedback from your customers, collecting ideas from internal stakeholders, aligning all of that information together with the problems that need to be solved, and making sure that everybody has a voice when it comes to building product. Really, ProdPad is about helping you to build the right product, to build the right solution to the right user problems. And it's a tool that helps with discovery, with strategy, and it helps you to manage the entire product life cycle rather than just on a project by project basis.
Perfect. Let me bring your demo into here.
There you go.
Yeah, I'd love to see more about ProdPad. I'm going to play around with it. I'm going to sign up for a trial after this call, and I'd love to play around with it. But yes, please tell us a little bit more about it.
Yeah, of course I will. So I'm just going to be looking away right now because I'm going to be looking at my bigger screen. So
Okay.
I'm staring at you. I'm staring at my bigger screen so I can see what I'm doing.
So here's the thing. What if I bring this to full screen?
There you go. Then you don't all have to look at my ear as I turn the other way. So ProdPad helps you to manage your entire product portfolio, whether that's a single product or, even hundreds of products. And we really sort of start at the top and move down in terms of having a portfolio canvas, which is a little like a business model canvas or a lean canvas. And it also allows you to manage objectives and key results. This is at the portfolio level, so these would be OKRs that are relevant across all of your products, but we also help you to manage OKRs for individual products too. When it comes to OKRs, it means you can define what you're trying to improve, so what your desired outcome might be, but also how you're measuring success, your key results. And you can link those key results to the work that's been done on your roadmap. So you're not just building blindly, that you are building things that are useful and helping you to achieve the objectives within your company. It's going to help you make sure that you can keep on track, but it'll also help you if you want to keep a track of how you perhaps got behind, or maybe that your OKR is at risk. And I say, this is helping you to be more outcome focused rather than just focusing on delivering features for a certain date. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the ProdPad roadmap is a little different to what you've perhaps seen in other tools, in that it's this lean roadmap structure, this now, next, later, where we're focusing on the problems that we want to solve and how those feed back into our OKRs. So you can see that here I'm looking about that we're currently working on making it easier for customers to understand our app, that we're trying to increase productivity by providing mobile access, and maybe we're providing some support for data exports as well. So without thinking about features or user stories or any of that kind of stuff at this point, we're thinking about the kind of problems that we're solving now, the problems that we're doing discovery on, that we're going to work on next, and the problems that we want to solve later. And as you can already see, the granularity of what's in the later column is going to be a lot higher level than perhaps the work that you're doing in the now column, where you understand it really well. Now, you can drill in here and start to see what are the ideas that you have to solve this problem. And these ideas come out of the idea backlog. Ideas being like your opportunity backlog or your product backlog, all the things that you could do when it comes to solving problems for your customers. Now, each of these ideas on the roadmap is something that we could work on that could help to solve this problem, where we want to make it easier for customers to understand the app. And you can see that there's a status associated with each one of these ideas. So this idea is in development. This one, we currently are measuring success. It's actually been delivered. And these two are in development too. And these stages here reflect the stage of an idea throughout the entire life cycle. If I just jump into the ideas section at this point and go to the workflow, you can see that our ideas are going through an entire life cycle, from the point where they're brand new and there may be just a glimmer in your eye, right through that early assessment and prioritization, discovery and research. Then they go through development, QA, and then get released out the other side. Now, the advantage of having this entire workflow means that we can manage our ideas through those early stages, but we can also sync up with a development tool like Jira. And this is something that ProdPad does via an integration. We integrate with Jira, with Trello, TFS, DevOps, a bunch of different tools. But really what we're doing here is pushing ideas over to the development tool to be executed on, but then we're keeping track in ProdPad as to where they've reached in that development life cycle. And this automatically is updated based on that integration with the dev tool. So if I jump back to my roadmap at this point, we can see the high-level objective. We can see the problem we want to solve. We can see the features that we're building or the experiments that we're running in order to try and solve that problem. And we can see where they are in our life cycle. so we can see what progress is being made. Now, as I say, notice here, none of this is time-based. This is just showing how we're going to solve a problem, and it's showing us what kind of outcomes we're going to bring for our customers. So we're focusing on building the right things and making the right decisions. The roadmap also does allow you to publish different versions for different people. One of the questions that you had was about how different people have a different perspective around what they want to see from the roadmap. Some people want to see the features and they want to see what's being delivered and why. Some people want to understand the problems being solved. Some want to understand what outcomes are being achieved. But essentially what we're doing here is creating different roadmaps for different people so that they can see whether a particular problem is being solved in a particular way. Let me just jump back into that here. Let's go and look at this roadmap here. Here you go. So in this roadmap, I have defined this as only showing me the roadmap cards or initiatives that are around user growth. I might say I want to see everything, but I only want to see the public cards. So I only want to see cards that are relevant to my customers that I'm actually going to publicize. I'm going to change the views that I have to see, where are we looking here? To see just a compact view. And then I can go and save that. I can password protect it, and I can publish that either using an embed code or a URL, or I can even embed that in Confluence using the ProdPad app in Confluence. What that gives me is the ability to create the right roadmap view for the right stakeholder audience at the right time. And as you mentioned, we publish a public roadmap on the ProdPad website at prodpad.com, and we're just using this functionality here and embedding the roadmap in our web page so that we can share details about the intentions we have with our product without necessarily showing all the intricate details of every feature we're going to build, because it allows us to be able to change that as time goes on, as we learn more about our audience and our market. The ProdPad roadmap also gives you the ability to plan ahead to things that you might want to add at a later date, kind of like a working area for your roadmap. And it also allows you to keep track of things you have delivered in the past. Not only that, it gives you the ability to keep track of what happened. Did you meet the outcomes that you had, the objectives that you had? Did you get user growth? What did work? What didn't work? So it's about measuring success and making sure that you've learned enough from what you've delivered that you could go and potentially update your current roadmap to reflect that learning. So the ProdPad roadmap gives you a hierarchy of outcomes that you want to achieve, or objectives or OKRs that you want to achieve, the problems that you want to solve or the themes that you're working on, the ideas that you have for how you might solve those problems, and the progress that you're making along the way. Now, I want to jump into ideas at this point and talk a little bit about the concept of an idea. And I'm going to start out actually by looking at the chart view of ideas. So every dot on this chart here reflects an idea of something we could do. Now, I know that a lot of people have backlogs in, say, Jira or Excel, or maybe just have lots of different ideas in lots of different tools. Maybe they're in Word documents or the email inboxes. What ProdPad gives you is the ability to have one backlog of all of the ideas that you may want to work on. This is your product backlog or your opportunity backlog, which is, I think, what Marty Kagan calls it. Now, every one of these ideas has been scored for impact and effort. If I go and jump into this one here, this is an idea to do a Google Maps integration, and I can see that it's been scored as Excel for impact. That's value to the user, value to the customer, value to our business, but it's been scored small in terms of effort. This is just a sliding scale, and that moves the dot around on the chart. If I go back and take a look at that view of the chart view, you can see that the color denotes when the idea was last updated, and the size of the dot indicates how much detail I've got, because an idea is really the start of a spec for something that I want to build. So you can see we've written user stories here, that we've got functional specs written, that we've got designs here. These designs are being pulled in from design tools like Marvel or Envision or Balsamic or whatever tool you happen to be using.
Okay.
So we can start to build up a full picture of exactly what's going on with this Google Maps integration. Note also that we have discussion sections here, and throughout the tool and all the different entities in ProdPad, you'll see this discussion area, because ProdPad is a very collaborative tool that allows you to get everybody in there discussing what's going on. We integrate with Slack so that you can bring your conversations from your colleagues into ProdPad, even if they started in Slack. And push notifications out into Slack, create ideas from Slack, and so on as well. So this spec, this idea is starting to build up here. It's been linked to the roadmap for actually a bunch of different products, because it's going to help with a bunch of different products within my platform. And I can also see that our Dotbot is giving me suggestions of other ideas that might be related in some way. This one, I think, is probably a duplicate, so I can mark it as a duplicate, merge them and archive them. This one here I could probably mark as not related, because although it is an integration, it's not Google, it's a Dropbox integration. Dotbot's also going to show me pieces of feedback that I've received from customers that is maybe supporting this piece of this idea that I have. Now, all of this work with Dotbot is done with natural language processing in the background that's helping me as a product manager to keep my backlog nice and clean, to help me understand where there's duplicates and make sure that when I'm looking at the backlog of ideas, I can really start to see the value for my product. Now, all of these things are things that I may or may not want to build, but by having impact and effort, I can see which are the quick wins. I can see which are the time sinks, the things that are going to take a lot of work to deliver but not give me value. I can see things that are perhaps more strategic in nature. I've really got to plan these well before I push ahead with them. Or I can see the things that are small tweaks, things that are easy to do but not maybe that valuable on their own. And I can filter this. I can start to say, well, I'm only interested in ideas for one particular product, and I'm interested in the ideas that are not yet on the roadmap. And I've got 4 here that are quick wins that I can start to investigate and see if these are ideas for problems that I want to solve on my roadmap. So maybe I got an idea for customizable color schemes. Maybe that's something that I could use to solve one of the problems on my roadmap. These filters work on a list view as well. So I can use that list of ideas to start triaging through. Maybe I start with the first idea, make an adjustment maybe to the impact and effort, or maybe I add a comment, or maybe I add in a functional spec, but then I might move through to the next idea and the next idea, and I'm working through a filtered list. So this is helping me to manage my time, manage the work that I'm doing, make sure that I'm choosing to work on the right things, but also giving me the opportunity to update what's in my backlog so that it's as current as possible.
That's amazing. I like that, Liz. I do have a question for you.
Go for it.
Now, ideas are good, but how are we linking them to maybe customer feedback?
Yeah, that's a great question.
It's, I can think of thousands of ideas like every founder can, but unless there's some kind of feedback to the customer, which makes it like more, I guess, adds more value to it, that somebody is actually wanting this. So how can we link back to, some kind of customer feedback?
Yeah, it's a great question. So you'll notice that ProdPad has a feedback section. And what we give you is a customer feedback portal that you can use to collect feedback from your customers. Now, that feedback portal, and I'll just go and grab one very quickly, that feedback portal is a simple form that allows you to collect feedback from your users, from your customers, either share it by a URL or embed it on a web page. But it's not just a voting system. Importantly, it gives you qualitative information as well as quantitative. Now, each piece of feedback here comes into ProdPad, comes into the feedback section, and then you can use that to support the ideas in your backlog or to validate your ideas. So this one here, Danielle has asked me for a Google Maps integration, and we've linked that to the ideas around Google Maps integration. And in fact, Dotbot will help me to do that. It will help me find other ideas that I might want to link this feedback to. So over time, you build up links between the things that your customers are asking for and the ideas in your backlog. And then you can start to sort those ideas so you can see which ones have the most feedback. I can see I've got an idea here to supply some FAQ documentation. And if I go and click into that, I can see that that's been asked for by these 11 customers. I can see who they are. I can see where they work. I can also importantly see what they said. They've not just clicked yes or voted on an idea. They've given me something qualitative that I can use to understand their problems and understand where they're coming from when they ask me for this feature. Now, the other thing that the feedback portal will give you is the ability to publicize ideas you're considering. Again, this isn't a voting, like a stack rank list of ideas. It's the things that you know strategically are right for you, but you're just wanting to collect extra feedback on. And when I when I refresh the page, that's reordered the ideas. So when customers come and look at this feedback portal, they go, oh yeah, animated explainer video, I want that. They're going to give you some contact information and again, some context. So they're telling you not just that they want this thing and if you like voting for it, but they're also telling you why they want it. And that piece of feedback would come in automatically linked to the idea.
Absolutely.
So what that gives me is the ability to see how many people are supporting the idea that I'm looking at here. It gives me the ability to see what they actually said. It gives me a ready-made list of people who might be interested in beta testing or usability testing. And when we actually deliver the feature, it gives me a list of people to go and sort of export their details, go and contact them, get in touch and let them know that this feature they asked for has been delivered. So that's going to drive adoption as well. So all of this together, whether it's that you're collecting feedback, and we give you the portal, but that could be integrated from lots of different sources too. Bring all of your feedback into ProdPad, use it to create ideas about what you might do to make your product better. Tie those ideas into your themes or your problems that are on the roadmap. Push those over to development to deliver them. Keep track of where they are in delivery based on these statuses. Make sure they tie back to the objectives you have as a company. And what you're really doing is bringing together information from different sources at different granularities. So you're delivering the things that your customers are asking for, but you're also meeting the objectives that your company has and that your business has and that you have for your product. So it's kind of tying everything together, allowing you to see all the different moving parts, organize all those moving parts. But overall, it's helping you to deliver the right changes to your product.
Perfect. That sounds amazing. Now, before we continue our conversation, if any of the viewers have any questions for Liz, feel free to drop them in the chat on YouTube, and hopefully we can get some of those answered. Liz, let me bring you back up on the screen. Thank you so much for that. Like I said, I'm going to spend some time playing around with ProdPad. It looks like an interesting tool. And from a roadmap trends perspective, you probably get to see, roadmaps from multiple different companies that your customers are using. What are some of the trends that you're seeing from your customers who are building roadmaps, how they're building it, and how it's all integrating into the bigger scheme of things?
Well, very happily, I can say that the biggest trend I've noticed, and I've been working in ProdPad for about just coming up on 3 years, and the biggest change I've noticed in those 3 years is how people are becoming much more focused on outcomes rather than just delivering features. You might have heard this term feature factory, where you're just churning features out the door, and I've seen a massive change from that into a much more considered view of delivering things that achieve outcomes for customers, achieve outcomes for users, and achieve outcomes for the business that, for their own business as well. I used to spend a lot of time explaining to people why it was good to be focused on outcomes, but I'm actually finding that now, whilst we still do that, it's not such a difficult concept, or it's not such an unusual concept for people to understand, and they're hearing it all over the place, which is great for us because that's our philosophy.
Absolutely. Now, what would you say to a founder, a product manager, a product person who is new in their career, who's just about starting to, get into roadmaps? The founder probably has a vision, but hasn't written it down, for a lack of a better word. What would you say to someone who's starting out creating more formalized roadmaps, for, again, lack of a better word?
Well, there's a couple of things. One is sit down with that founder and interview them, like speak to them, have a big conversation about vision, and don't rush into the details, don't rush into solutions, and don't rush into the nitty-gritty. Really understand what's the high level problem that the founder wants to solve for his or her customers. Understand what the objectives are, what the outcomes are, what would success look like for the founder, and just start there. Don't necessarily be biased by the features that a founder wants to actually build. It's the vision and the problems that want to be solved that are the most important. Also spend a lot of time, I mean, this almost goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway, speak to customers, speak to users. It doesn't need to be on site. It doesn't need to be an expensive thing to do. Networking and speaking to people online and understanding the industry you're in is really important. Even if you don't necessarily understand the product that you've inherited, understanding the people that product is serving and helping is just like the basics. You have to understand that well. Don't be scared to ask why over and over and over again. As long as it's kind of phrased in the right way, and it's what kind of problems are you trying to solve? What outcomes are you trying to achieve? Why are you trying to achieve that outcome? Why is that outcome so important? Almost acting like your typical kind of toddler, your 4-year-old who says why 400 times a day. I think that's absolutely so important. And it becomes part of your life. Somebody said to me recently that as they learned more about product management, they understood why I constantly say why and ask people why. It's just part of who I am now.
Yep.
It makes such a difference when you can really drill into the pain point and understand it. You've got a much better chance of building the right solution for them.
It absolutely does. We have a question here from Raj. Great chat so far. Thank you, Raj, for joining. Thanks, Liz and ProdPad. How does ProdPad scale for portfolio management?
It's actually really good for that. And we do have a bunch of enterprise customers who are using ProdPad. One of the great things about it is that because the portfolio breaks down into product lines, meaning that you can group products together in logical ways, and you can have lots of different product lines within here, you can manage quite a large portfolio. Not only that we have filters on here, which means that you can filter by which product you're interested, or maybe which product manager is managing a product. And when it comes to the roadmap itself and publishing the roadmap, again, loads of different filters on here to help you to do that. There's also at the portfolio level a roadmap that is for all of the products in the portfolio, which again can be filtered. And all of that comes together to mean that if you've got a large portfolio and you have different kind of ways of slicing and dicing those products and slicing and dicing the outcomes you're trying to achieve, a lot of that can be done with filters within the product to give you the view that's right. One thing we've learned very clearly from companies with large portfolios is that need to give different views for different stakeholders within the company.
Definitely. Thank you. And a follow-up question Raj has: for a new product manager who has recently become the owner of the feature, how do you suggest they go about prioritizing their items?
So I would definitely go back to something like this, which is the chart view of ideas. for each individual idea, have a think about what it would mean for the user in terms of impact, and maybe think about, is that going to help with a particular pain point, or is it going to help a lot of users, or is it going to give you a competitive advantage? All of those are kind of things that are going to make your impact score higher. I've certainly seen people who have massive big algorithms around all the different facets of an idea. Don't do that. That is going to be very, very difficult for you to manage, especially as you get a bigger backlog. Having a simple prioritization framework where you think about a few important criteria around the numbers of people that are working, that the idea will help, or the impact on them in terms of how much pain they're experiencing or how much gain they could get. That's going to give you a quick, easy way of sorting your impact score. And then for effort, is it small effort, you just have to eyeball and it's done, or is it like months and months of work that you need to break down that would make it high effort? Using that impact versus effort score and tying the idea back to a problem that's on your roadmap, so a high level theme in terms of something that your users are experiencing as a problem, that's the best way to look at prioritization rather than making the numbers do the work for you.
Perfect. Thank you, Liz, and thank you, Raj, for asking the question. We're coming up to the top of the hour, Liz. Anything you'd like to say before we close the session?
Oh, crikey, anything I'd like to say. The biggest piece of advice I can ever give, and I've probably already said it, is just keep asking questions. Leave your biases at the door, ask questions. If anything, just always assume you're wrong, and then how you're going to prove yourself right. If you assume that you are wrong, and go about a way of proving whether you are right or wrong, you're going to have a better chance of coming out with a better answer.
Leave your ego at the door then.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Liz. I really appreciate you spending the time and talking about roadmaps and sharing ProdPad with us. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. It was really nice to see you. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you.